And what happened about 10 years ago in my own work and colleagues at MIT is we discovered that there was a really fundamental difference between bits and atoms. And I promise those of you who know me not to give you a bits and atoms lecture, but if you look at the world as being divided in those two parts and you understand the difference between bits and atoms, that explains a great deal. It explains sort of what's happening and explains where we might be going. And it turns out that we all understand viscerally, intellectually, and in all sorts of ways we understand atoms. We're made out of atoms. We eat them, we wear them. I'm standing on some, etc. And that is a world that whether you knew it from physics or you knew it from just navigating the physical world, you still knew it. The world of bits is a really curious world. This is a world made up of little ones and zeros. They have no size, they have no shape, they have no color, they have no mass, and they can move at the speed of light, which is sort of another property. And we have no visceral understanding of what bits are. And yet they are now part of everything. And there's some extraordinary, I'll just pick one bits and atoms story. And imagine telling this to your great-great-grandfather, were you able to, have that occasion. The economy as we've known it historically has been an economy built out of atoms. And a room full of people like yourselves epitomize that. You are in the atoms business primarily. Now, if you're a manufacturer, and let's not think in terms of buildings or pieces of cities, but let's say you manufacture an artifact of some sort, a toaster. If that toaster becomes popular, if through advertising, through whatever, and there is a lot of demand, you have learned, all of us have learned at school, that there's something called the economy of scale. We can buy our raw materials at a better price. We can maybe perfect the process of assembling this, and so the price of the toaster can go down and the quality of the toaster can go up. And this is an economy that we're very familiar with. But each time you sell a toaster, clearly the person to whom you've sold it has it, you don't. And as it gets more and more popular, of course, you have to move earth and materials are shipped around and energy is used, etc. Now imagine telling to your great-great-grandparent that you're in a new industry, and this industry manufactures bits. And let's pretend that you can even convey that you manufacture these bits sort of between your ears, that there is no raw material moving, there is no earth being dug or chemicals being made. And then when you sell somebody those bits, you also have them. You both have the bits. It's a little bit like an idea versus a toaster. I can sell you an idea, I can give you an idea, but I still have the idea myself. And with bits, if the bits become popular, and there's now a great demand on my bits that I've manufactured, suddenly the marginal cost to make more of these is zero. What an extraordinary business. The marginal cost to make more is zero, and by the way, there's no inventory, there's effectively no distribution costs, no transportation costs. It's a different world. And you wonder why companies like Microsoft and others do very well, is that they're in that kind of business. It doesn't follow the old rules of manufacturing and inventory, etc. So when you look at the world in terms of how it divides into bits and atoms, it explains a great deal. And it explains, to me at least, why the internet and why the digital world has moved so much faster than even the most sort of far left in the terms of the people forecasting had ever predicted. So what I'd like to do is use now as an occasion to tell you two big surprises that I believe are going to happen because of this bits and atoms change, which are currently not being forecast. And one of the things that people ask me more than ever is, what is the next big one? What is the next big change that's going to take place? Because people are actually quite surprised that the internet caught them off guard, that they didn't realize it would happen this quickly, changes in e-commerce, which I'll talk about, etc. And I have two to offer you. Now, clearly, we won't know for a couple of years whether I was right or wrong, but you can think back to this luncheon and decide that at some later date. Because there really are two very, very big things that are about to happen. The first happens to do with the demographics of the internet. And this will interest especially the people in the audience who are from countries other than the United States. If you look, and it turns out you only have to look back 2.5 years. If you look back 2.5 years in time, you will find that the consensus amongst forecasters was that in the year 2003, e-commerce would equal $327 billion. And I remember the number very well. Clinton quoted it, people wrote about it, $327 billion in the year 2003. Well, I don't know about you, I'm kind of, at the time, was kind of offended by the 27. I wondered, where did that come from? But I was also extraordinarily annoyed because I'm not using hindsight, a company like Cisco was doing $5 billion a year already of e-commerce on the internet 2.5 years ago. Dell, 2.5 years ago, was doing $1 million a day, 7 days a week. By the way, it's doing $30 million a day now. But the point is that we had indicators which made that number brainless. A few months later, September of that year, Schwab was already doing $2 billion a week on the internet. So what was wrong with the forecasters? Why did they not get it? They were just knuckleheads. They couldn't see that this was really big. Now, they've got it. And you look at the forecasts, and you look at the forecasts for the same 2003, and it's somewhere between $1.5 and $2 trillion. That's sort of the range, and there's a consensus for that. So they got the size right. They got the pie right. But they got the distribution wrong. They completely have the distribution wrong, and there lies surprise number one. If you look at pie charts today as to what the future of commerce will be on the internet, you will find that it is almost uniformly divided. 50% the United States, 40% Europe, 5% Japan and Korea, and 5% the rest of the world. And it's the rest of the world that they have all wrong. The rest of the world is not going to be 5%. Because what's happening, and it's not getting figured into the forecast, is that developing countries are moving much, much faster, not just in the pure mathematics of growth because the percentage growth of a small number gives bigger percentages, but in terms of the imperative that drives very creative use of computers and education of computers and commerce, and also how they're being used. The numbers get confusing because, take Mexico, there are today a little over 300,000 paid subscribers. Now, paid subscriber for the internet doesn't include the universities and the students who have access otherwise and stuff, but these are just paid accounts. Now, behind each one of those accounts are 6 people, and not a mother and father and 4 kids, but 6 people, this is average, 6 people who are sharing the account, sharing the cost in order to have access. Now, clearly, the internet service provider would much prefer to have 6 accounts versus 1 shared by 6 people, but from my point of view, that's 12 eyeballs, that's 6 potential buyers, 6 potential sellers, and a rate of penetration that is a different form of use than ours. In Vietnam, 400 people behind 1 computer in an internet cafe with Yahoo addresses and so on. So what we're seeing, and it's not being reflected in the statistics, but what you will see, and it's going to be a huge, huge surprise, is that the next billion users will hit 1 billion within the next few months. Maybe it might take as long as 10 months. But it's the next billion that are going to be interesting, because the next billion are really going to be from the developing world. And in the first billion, half of them will be from the developing